You ever wonder what he's really thinking in those quiet moments? The ones where he pauses like he's about to say something but doesn't? Here's the truth. Most men have secret desires they wish they could share. Kinky, bold, unexpected things they crave in bed, but they hold back. Not because they don't trust you, but because they're terrified of what happens if they do speak up. What if you see them differently? What if you laugh? What if the moment changes forever? The craziest part, these hidden desires aren't just about sex. They're about freedom, connection, and being truly known in a way most men never get to experience. Let's talk about the things he's not saying but desperately wants you to know. When it comes to intimacy, there's something most people don't realize about men. They're not nearly as confident as they appear. Sure, a man might seem bold, assertive, and even a little cocky on the outside, but when it comes to revealing what he really wants in bed, especially if it's something outside the norm, a surprising thing happens. He goes quiet, not because he doesn't feel desire, but because he's scared. Scared of being judged, misunderstood, or even laughed at. And that fear of judgment runs far deeper than the fear of being rejected. Rejection is simple. It's a yes or no. Judgment is personal. It lingers. It changes how someone sees you, or at least that's the fear. Let's take a common example. A guy might have a fantasy about trying something playful, maybe being tied up, or experimenting with a little role reversal, but he'll rarely say it out loud. Why? Because it threatens the image he thinks he needs to maintain, that image of being strong, masculine, in control. The second he expresses something that feels different from that role, he starts to worry. What if she thinks I'm weak? What if she laughs? What if she tells her friends? What if she pulls away after hearing it? So he keeps it to himself. He tells you what he thinks you want to hear, and he does what he thinks is acceptable, even if it's a watered-down version of what he truly desires. This fear of judgment isn't always about the partner either. Sometimes it's internal. Men grow up absorbing silent rules. Rules about what's manly, what's normal, what's too much. They carry these rules into the bedroom. And if a desire falls outside of that narrow box, it becomes a source of shame, not excitement. He starts questioning himself. Does this make me less of a man? Am I broken for wanting this? And when that shame builds, desire gets buried underneath it. So now he's in bed, mentally holding himself back, even with someone he cares about, even with someone he trusts. He wants more, but he doesn't feel safe asking for it. What makes it even more complicated is how subtle this can be. He won't say, "I'm scared you'll judge me." He might not even consciously realize that's what's happening, but you'll notice it in little ways. The things he doesn't bring up, the way he deflects certain conversations, the jokes he makes when things get a little too real. And yet, underneath all of that, there's a longing to be accepted, to be seen, and still wanted. Not just for the version of him that plays it cool, but for the version of him that's curious, kinky, vulnerable, even a little awkward. What most people don't understand is that sharing a fantasy isn't just about the act itself. It's a test. It's a quiet way of asking, can you handle the real me? That's why rejection doesn't sting as much as judgment. If someone says no but still accepts you, you feel safe. But if they laugh, cringe, or pull away emotionally, that cuts deeper. It becomes a moment that reinforces the belief that it's better to stay silent. So men carry this internal struggle. The desire is there, the curiosity is there, but unless they feel absolutely sure that they won't be shamed for it, they keep those parts of themselves locked away. Not because they want to be dishonest, but because they're protecting something fragile. the belief that they can be fully known and still fully loved. When people think of men and sex, they often imagine confidence, control, and straightforward desire. But beneath that surface, there's something much more delicate happening, something that rarely gets talked about. Men crave emotional safety before they feel free enough to be truly vulnerable in bed. That vulnerability isn't just about talking feelings. It's about opening up, showing a side of themselves that doesn't match the strong, composed image they believe they're supposed to maintain. And when it comes to trying something kinky or outside the norm, that emotional safety becomes even more important. It's easy to assume that men are always ready, always willing, and always down to try something new. But in reality, many men are far more hesitant than they let on. Not because they're not interested, but because trying something new requires them to drop their guard. And dropping that guard means risking being misunderstood. That's a big ask. For a man to say, hey, I've always wanted to try this thing, he's not just asking to do something physical, he's asking, will you still see me the same way after I show you this side of me? And the only way he'll ask that is if he feels like the answer will be yes. For many men, sexual vulnerability is directly tied to emotional safety. Without it, they default to what feels safe, being predictable, staying inside the lines, doing what's already known and accepted. They might joke about something kinky in passing, or pretend they don't care about trying anything new, but deep down, what they're often thinking is, I want to show you this part of me, but only if I know you won't use it against me. Emotional safety isn't just about being kind. It's about making it clear that curiosity isn't a threat, that desire won't be turned into shame, and that stepping outside the ordinary doesn't mean stepping into danger. This is especially true when a man is interested in something that might make him feel less in control. Things like being submissive, exploring fantasies, or experimenting with roles that go against traditional masculinity. It takes a huge amount of trust to say, I want you to take the lead, or I want to play with power in a different way. Not because the act itself is so radical, but because admitting to wanting it feels exposing. It's like peeling back a layer he spent years building, and without the reassurance that he'll be met with openness and curiosity, not judgment, he'll keep that desire hidden. What people often miss is that for men, safety doesn't come from permission, it comes from connection. You can tell him it's okay to talk about fantasies 100 times, but if he doesn't feel emotionally safe with you, he won't go there. Safety to him looks like being listened to without flinching, being teased with affection rather than mockery, being allowed to explore without the fear of being seen as too much or not enough. That's what gives him the freedom to actually express what he wants. And when that safety is there, it changes everything. Suddenly, what was once a secret becomes a shared experience. He no longer feels like he's hiding a part of himself. He starts to see the bedroom not just as a place for performance, but as a space for expression. That shift is subtle, but powerful. It's the difference between doing what's expected and discovering what's exciting. And it all starts with the feeling that no matter what he wants to explore, he'll be met with understanding, not distance. Because when a man feels emotionally safe, he becomes more open, more present, and ultimately more connected. Not just physically, but emotionally too. There's a common assumption that men always want to be in control in the bedroom, the dominant one, the leader, the one calling the shots. And while that might be true some of the time, it's far from the whole picture. The truth is, a lot of men are deeply curious about power dynamics in bed, but not in the one-directional way people often assume. For many men, there's an unspoken desire to explore both sides of control. Not just having it, but giving it up. And that's not about weakness or domination. It's about trust, intensity, and play. For some, the idea of being dominant is exciting because it taps into a raw, primal energy. It gives them permission to be assertive, expressive, and bold in ways they might hold back in real life. It's a chance to step into a role that feels freeing. There's a kind of adrenaline that comes with being the one who's leading, deciding, pushing limits with care and confidence. But for just as many men, the opposite can be just as powerful. The thought of letting go, of being told what to do, of surrendering control, can be equally arousing, not because they want to be controlled in a general sense, but because in that specific space, giving up power can feel like relief. Most men are carrying a huge amount of responsibility in their everyday lives. They're expected to be stable, decisive, reliable, and in charge. So, when it comes to intimacy, there's something incredibly appealing about the idea of just letting go. Not having to make the decisions, not having to lead, just trusting their partner to take over and guide the moment. But here's the part most people miss. That kind of vulnerability only works when there's absolute trust, because the second a man feels unsafe, unsure, or judged for wanting to explore a different side of power, the whole fantasy collapses. Even when a man does want to try something more dominant, he might hold back unless he's sure his partner is on board emotionally, not just physically. It's not just about acting assertive. It's about making sure he's not stepping into a role that makes his partner uncomfortable or creates distance. The weight of that responsibility can make him second guess himself. So whether he wants to take charge or let go, the root of the desire is the same. He wants to feel like his role in that moment is not only accepted, but desired. This curiosity about power dynamics often lives in silence. A man might think about it, fantasize about it, maybe even watch things that reflect it, but he won't bring it up in conversation. Why? Because, again, it comes back to fear. What if she thinks I'm weird? What if she sees me differently? What if she thinks I'm trying to be someone I'm not? And so the fantasy stays a fantasy. Not because he doesn't trust his partner, because he doesn't fully trust that it's okay to express that part of himself. What's important to understand is that these dynamics aren't about disrespect, aggression, or control in the way people sometimes assume. They're about energy, intensity, exploration. They're about stepping into different roles for the sake of connection, excitement, and deeper intimacy. And when a man feels like he can explore both giving and receiving power without shame, that's when something amazing happens. He becomes more present, more honest, more turned on, not just physically, but emotionally. Because now he's not just doing what he's supposed to do. He's doing what he wants to do. And he knows that you see all sides of him, not just the confident one, but the curious one too, and still want him just the same. Most people assume that men just want sex, that they're mostly driven by visual attraction, physical touch, and the thrill of the moment. And while those things do matter, there's something deeper that often gets overlooked. Men don't just want sex, they want to be wanted. Not in the casual, you're hot kind of way, but in a raw, undeniable, almost animalistic way. They want to feel like you can't help but want them, that you crave them, not just accept them. And what's surprising is how much of this desire shows up in the kinks or fantasies they're too embarrassed to say out loud. For many men, the fantasies they keep hidden are often about being desired in ways that aren't typical. Maybe it's about being used for your pleasure. Maybe it's about being teased to the edge. Maybe it's about being worshipped. Or on the flip side, about being denied. These are things that challenge the usual man takes the lead narrative. Instead, they're about being pursued, being the object of lust, being the one who is wanted so intensely that the usual rules don't apply. That's the real fantasy. But here's where it gets complicated, because that kind of desire is hard to ask for. It's easy to say, let's have sex. It's harder to say, I want you to lose control because you want me so badly. It's vulnerable. It exposes a need that feels unmanly to admit. Men are taught to chase, to initiate, to prove their worth. But what they often want deep down is to feel like they're being chased too, like they're irresistible, like they're not just performing desire, but receiving it. This shows up in subtle ways. A guy might fantasize about you taking full control, not because he wants to give up his masculinity, but because he wants to feel how much you want him. Or he might get turned on by dirty talk that makes him feel like he's the center of your desire. It's not always about the kink itself. It's about the feeling underneath it. The feeling of being needed, hungered for, craved. And for a man who spends most of his life trying to be strong and composed, that kind of surrender can be incredibly intoxicating. But again, asking for that is risky. Because what if it's too much? What if it sounds arrogant? What if it comes across as needy? Those doubts creep in, and he decides it's safer to keep the fantasy to himself. So he doesn't say it. He plays it cool. He stays within the boundaries of what's expected, all the while carrying around this secret wish to feel completely desired. Even in long-term relationships, this craving doesn't go away. In fact, it can become stronger. When a man feels emotionally close to someone, he starts to wonder if he can finally let that desire out. If he can finally say, I want you to want me, in that wild, no holding back kind of way. But again, that only happens if he feels it's safe. If he believes that he won't be judged, mocked, or brushed off. If he knows that you won't just tolerate that side of him, but actually be turned on by it. So when a man secretly wants something kinky in bed, it's often not about the act itself. It's about what the act represents. It's about being chosen, being needed, being the one who drives you a little crazy in the best way. That's the part he's afraid to admit out loud. But it's also the part that, if met with the right energy, can make him feel seen in a way that very few things ever have. Roleplay might sound like just a game to some people, costumes, characters, accents, but for many men, it goes way deeper than that. It's not just about pretending to be someone else. It's about escaping the everyday pressure of being who they're expected to be. Most men walk through life wearing an invisible armor. They're expected to be strong, dependable, logical, emotionally contained. They're constantly navigating work, family, money, relationships, and somewhere in all that, they lose the freedom to just play. That's where roleplay becomes more than fun. It becomes a doorway to freedom, a space where he can let go of who he's supposed to be and step into something wildly different. Imagine a man who's always the responsible one, always making decisions, always holding everything together. Maybe at work he's a manager, a business owner, a provider. That role doesn't just turn off when he walks into the bedroom. He brings it with him, sometimes even without realizing it. So when he fantasizes about role play, it's often about stepping into something totally opposite. Maybe he wants to be the student instead of the teacher. Maybe he wants to be the one who's told what to do for once. Maybe he wants to be a stranger in a hotel bar, free from identity, free from expectation. It's not just sexy, it's deeply relieving. But here's the thing, he may never say that out loud, because admitting it can feel awkward, silly, even risky. What if she doesn't get it? What if she laughs? What if it comes off as childish or weird? That fear of looking foolish is strong. Men are often taught to take sex seriously, to perform, to be good at it, to know what they're doing. So the idea of stepping into a playful, imaginative scenario can feel vulnerable. It means taking off the mask and saying, I want to try something different. I want to be someone else, just for a little while. That kind of honesty takes courage, and most men won't go there unless they feel incredibly safe. What makes roleplay so powerful is that it offers a break from reality, and not just in a fantasy sense. It gives him permission to show you sides of himself that don't get to exist anywhere else. In everyday life, he may never be able to express those parts, maybe because they don't fit the image people have of him. But in roleplay, those parts can come alive, and when they do, something surprising happens. He doesn't feel less like himself, he feels more like himself, because now he's not just showing you the polished, composed version of who he is, he's showing you the wild, curious, maybe even a little chaotic version that he usually keeps hidden. The beautiful part is that when roleplay is done with trust and openness, it brings people closer. It's not just about turning each other on, it's about discovery. It's about learning what excites him, what frees him, what makes him feel fully alive. And that kind of exploration creates a different level of connection. He starts to feel like he's not just being loved for the role he plays in everyday life, but for the full, complicated, imaginative person he really is underneath. And that's what makes the fantasy worth sharing. Even if it takes time, even if it's scary, even if it starts as just a whisper. Because once he feels like he can bring all of himself into that space with you, the bedroom becomes more than just a place for sex. It becomes a stage for freedom. One of the biggest reasons men keep their sexual desires, especially the kinkier ones, to themselves, isn't because they don't trust their partner or because they don't want to share. It's because they're afraid that once they do, everything will change. Not in a fun, exciting way, but in a way that makes things uncomfortable, a way that makes them feel exposed. The fear isn't just about the act being rejected. It's about them being seen differently afterward. That's a deeply personal fear, one that strikes right at the core of how men view themselves and how they believe they're seen by the people they care about most. There's a specific kind of vulnerability that comes with sharing something sexual. It's not the same as sharing an opinion or even an emotion. It's a part of the self that's tied to shame, desire, identity, and ego. So when a man considers opening up about something he's always wanted to try in bed, something a little taboo or off the beaten path, he's not just weighing whether you'll say yes. He's asking himself if you'll look at him sideways afterward. Will she think I'm strange? Will she question my masculinity? Will this be a turn-off? Will it linger in her mind in a way that creates distance instead of closeness? Men grow up with a certain image of what they're supposed to be. Strong, in control, uncomplicated. And when a fantasy goes against that image, even just a little, it creates an internal battle. He might fantasize about being submissive, or being tied up, or playing with dominance in a different way. And on the surface, it seems harmless. It's playful. It's consensual. It's part of a trusting relationship. But in his head, that fantasy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It threatens the version of himself that he thinks you admire. He wonders, if I show you this part of me, will you still respect me? Will you still want me the same way? That's the kind of thought that can keep a man silent for years, because once the words are out there, they can't be taken back. If the reaction is lukewarm or worse, if it's met with a laugh, a judgmental look, or an awkward silence, it doesn't just shut down the fantasy. It shuts down a part of him. It reinforces the belief that some things are better left unsaid, that it's safer to keep those parts of himself hidden, even in a relationship that feels loving and supportive. This fear can exist even with partners who are emotionally open. Even in relationships where communication is strong, it's not always about the other person's behavior. Sometimes it's just the voice in his own head, the one that says, "Don't ruin a good thing. Don't make her see you differently." That voice is powerful, and it means that a lot of men never get to experience the full depth of intimacy that comes with being completely known and still fully accepted. That's what's really at the heart of many kinky desires. It's not about the kink itself, it's about wanting to be seen, accepted, and desired without condition. It's about testing the waters of full honesty and hoping that on the other side, love and attraction will still be there. That's why some fantasies are kept quiet. Not because they're too wild, but because they feel too risky. Because once a man shows that hidden part of himself, he's not just trying something new. He's hoping that afterward, when the lights are back on and the moment is over, you'll still look at him the same way. Maybe even better. Maybe like someone who trusted you enough to let go. At the end of the day, what men secretly want in bed isn't just about the physical. It's about expression, trust, vulnerability, and connection. Behind every unspoken fantasy is a quiet hope that they'll be accepted, not just for what they do, but for who they are when the masks come off. Whether it's craving emotional safety, playing with power dynamics, wanting to be deeply desired, exploring roleplay, or simply being honest about a hidden curiosity, these desires all come from the same place: the need to feel fully seen and still fully wanted. And when a man finds a partner who makes space for that, without judgment, without fear, without shame, he's not just more open in bed, he's more open in love. Because intimacy isn't just built on what happens between the sheets, it's built on what's safe to say before and after.